This is a Founding Media podcast.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Up and Comers here with Founding Austin magazine. My name's Heather. I'm your host, and we're going to get into a really cool startup story coming out of Austin, Texas. We're down at the Long Center this morning, smack in the middle of South by Southwest. It's a really exciting time here in the city. And before we start, I just want to thank Richard's Rainwater and Brain Juice.
Yes.
We're drinking this morning too. Brain Juice for their support of our episode this morning. So, welcome to my two guests, John Higley and Stefan Schuster.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm just so excited to have you on the show today because I've had the pleasure of getting to know these guys recently and hearing their startup story, and it is really a disruptive, innovative concept that is so good that we just had to have them on today. So
awesome, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So their company is called EQO, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about it. Why don't you start, John?
Sure. So EQO or ECO, we started probably around 2016. I first started doing the research for it. We help water resources with aquatic invasive species like Zebra Mussels that have been plaguing Austin by using next generation genetic technologies. My background is in mostly cancer research. I'm a molecular biologist. I did a lot of early stage cancer diagnostic platforms, microbiome analytics to an extent, and biopharmaceutical development. And so we're essentially leveraging those technologies to help the environment. So we do really early stage detection, so we can do prevention, but we also do risk management, mitigation, things like that. So there's certain technologies that we employ that are not currently on the market from other companies. And so we can determine things like, are they alive or are they dead, which seems simple, but it's not something that can be determined right now except for by us. But we can also look at how they're responding to treatment. So if they're experiencing stress early on, later on stress, this allows you to kind of make better mitigation decisions. Also, predicting spawning, things like that. But the technology is not limited to zebra mussels. We can also leverage it for endangered species protection or really any invasive species or endangered species. The idea is to create long-term sustainable biodiverse ecosystems and water supplies throughout the country and around the world. And that's kind of the mission.
Wonderful. So I know that many Austinites know about the mussel issue that happened here a few weeks ago. Maybe, Stefan, do you want to talk a little bit more about what happened and
Sure.
why this is an issue or potential epidemic?
Absolutely. And so I met John 3 years ago at a conference and heard him speak about his technology. And my background is in water resources and supply. And so I immediately knew that our water suppliers in Texas are facing a big issue in regards to the zebra mussels because of the impact that it has on how much power we use, how the water quality is affected in the lakes. And so if you've been using the Highland Lakes over the last 2-3 years, you've started to see the lakes are getting clear, the water quality is changing, and that has a big impact on how our water comes to us. And so what happened with the city of Austin is something that could have actually been prevented with our technology because we would have been able to detect the problem before they turned the pipe back on. Right. And so what happened was they turned the pipe off, let it dry out, basically turned it back on without knowing that it was totally covered with zebra mussels on the inside. So we watched a bunch of dead organic material into our drinking water. That will happen to other water suppliers in the area, and so we're trying to prevent that.
Wow. I think as a normal citizen in Austin, these are things you just don't even think about or anticipate until it happens.
That's right.
So, that's just something that's so fascinating to know that behind the scenes, this type of science is actually, your science being brand new, but this type of issues going on.
Absolutely, and it's coming right out here out of Austin. That's what I think is really exciting is that we're starting here in Austin, and it's a problem that's very much developing here in Austin for our city and our regional water supplier. So we're presenting a solution at a time where everybody's looking for one. So the timing couldn't be better.
Wow. Yeah, and you guys were all over the news when that happened.
Exactly.
So you're basically thought leaders on the issue, I think, right now. So this is not something that's obviously just happening in Austin. It's a global issue. I'm curious about, how this could work with governments around the world, I guess, for that matter.
Yeah, so obviously the zebra and quagga mussel problem is a big issue here in the U.S., also in Canada, also in Western Europe. And there are additional invasive species all over the world. I mean, as as people have expanded, they move around, shipping, things like that. Invasive species get moved from place to place. And the concern is, what may be a normal native species in one environment is invasive and can take over and change an environment where they show up. And it seems kind of like, well, what's wrong with a couple extra species? The problem is that they take over the environment to an extent that it makes the environment a lot less biodiverse. And in biology, basically, diversity is the best way to have a sustainable ecosystem. The more diversity you have, the more it's able to respond to pressures. So governments around the world are impacted by this. The State Department there are treaties around this that the State Department has to get involved in. So it's really a global issue, and our technology can be applied pretty much everywhere, and especially as we become a more interconnected society, and as global warming changes, migration patterns and things like that, we're only going to see increased issues with invasive species and loss of habitat and usable drinking water if we don't act now.
So I'd like to talk more about the technology. So how does it work?
Sure.
What is the concept? Is this something that, let's say I want to have it in my backyard. Is that even possible?
It sure is. I mean, it'll be a little pricey for an individual citizen to have it in their backyard, but essentially we have kind of an automated sampling platform. Mm-hmm. So it gets installed at a point of critical infrastructure, like a dam, or at a point of most likely entry. So dams and marinas, these things, zebra mussels travel mostly and invasive species in general, travel largely by recreational boaters. So clean, drain, dry, all that kind of stuff. So this platform goes in, it's got a series of these, what we call sample collectors, that essentially concentrate biological samples over a series of filters. And then we have a special proprietary buffer that goes in and stops the degradation of any DNA and RNA, which are the kind of what we're going to be measuring in the lab. So that kind of preserves it or kind of pickles it and keeps it in the state. So it allows us to kind of take a snapshot of what's going on at that moment. And then the person who operates it or, wherever it is, all they have to do is swap out sample packs and ship it back forth to the lab. So we're constantly sending them updates about what's going on in their lake. And they're constantly all they got to do is pop it out and pop a new one in. And you program the whole thing from a cell phone. It's run on solar power, on a solar panel. It's pretty low maintenance piece of equipment.
I love the DNA aspect of this. So this is where you're taking your background in cancer,
right,
applying it to bioscience or biotech.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit more about the science there?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So DNA, as we all know, is kind of the blueprint, right? Or it's more like a library of blueprints that's in every cell of the body. DNA is a very stable molecule. It doesn't break down very quickly. It persists in the environment for a pretty long period of time. So we can collect DNA off of pretty much anything, particulate matter, dead skin cells. If something else eats a zebra mussel and poops it out, we can find that, all of that stuff. And then you can also measure it and figure out exactly how much. So that gives you a nice baseline. It doesn't tell you if the thing that you're reading is alive or dead, though, because DNA can float around for quite a while. RNA, if we remember our central dogma of biology, right? It's DNA transcribes into RNA. RNA is a more transient molecule. It's very fragile. It breaks down extremely quickly. And then that gets translated into protein, which does all the actual work. So the RNA, since it breaks down very quickly, if we can capture that at the source, which our technology does, then that allows us to take a snapshot of what genes are on or off at the time. So we can determine, is it alive or dead by looking at, is it metabolizing or not? And we can determine if it's experiencing stress, because there's all these different genes that get turned on whenever you or a zebra mussel or anything else experiences stress. And there's different families, obviously, different species have different ones that they utilize, but the zebra mussel is fairly simple. So it's pretty easy to just kind of figure out what it's doing and why it's doing it based on what genes are turned on and off at that moment.
Well, I got to say, I was there the night that you guys won a very big prize with Mash Challenge.
Yep.
So there's obviously a lot of innovation around this concept, and this company is super disruptive. And so I just wanted to ask you, Stefan, if you could talk a little bit more about that experience, because y'all were the big winner
Absolutely.
that night for the Mass Challenge Accelerator, and you've done a lot of other accelerators in the past few years, and you're going on to do more. And it's fascinating that everybody's supporting you through this process. So
Absolutely.
tell us more
Austin's a
about that.
fantastic place for that community, and Mass Challenge has been really great to us. It was a really great place to get with mentors and have a really good idea of how to structure our business and be successful in terms of growing and thinking about things that we haven't really even encountered yet in terms of scaling, getting our companies ready for the types of things that are going to happen from here on forward, with the types of successes we're going to have. So it's really great to be able to be working in the accelerator environment with a disruptive technology, because there's others like-minded individuals around you at all times who can help you, whether it's something that you've never dealt with on a marketing perspective or on fundraising perspectives, you're always exposed to really great mentors and resources to be able to solve your problems. And so Mass Challenge was fantastic to be able to be part of such a large group, and it's competitive. You start with 400 companies at the beginning, and then I think 64 accepted ultimately, or 84 accepted, and then making it into the final 16 and kind of getting to a point where you really realize that there's something big happening. And Mass Challenge and that win has been fantastic.
They won
$100,000,
and that's one of the biggest cash prizes.
That's right.
It was the largest cash prize.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there were two $100,000 cash prizes. That was the largest tier.
That speaks volumes to also how really the mentors were the ones involved in helping select these winners, and I guess just you've got a lot of people supporting you.
Absolutely.
Now you're working at Capital Factory.
That's right.
Are you involved with their accelerator?
We are.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've been through a few. We started out, when I started this, I was, a scientist. I had a startup previously, but I was the white lab coat that they rolled in to talk science. That was a biopharma company. I wasn't the C-suite. So I thought, I still had this kind of thought process of, you make something really cool, and then everybody's going to buy it because it's great, and why wouldn't they? And that's not how business works at all. Right. So I kind of had to learn that along the way. And Cindy Walker-Peach was a big part of pushing us to go to ATI's program that UT puts on called SEAL. That was the first one. That was kind of an intensive summer accelerator program. It was essentially like an MBA for entrepreneurs, but condensed into a summer. And that was super helpful. We met some great people there. David Altunian is one of our big advisors.
Yep.
He was running it at the time.
Hi, David.
Yeah.
Hey, shout out to David.
You better be watching.
From there we did Mass Challenge, and now it's kind of, now we're at the point where we know how to run a business quite well. It's kind of the accelerator programs now are it's just a matter of they have to be fairly hands off and offer us good access to funding. Right. And those are our big criteria now. So now we're part of Tarmac, which is great because they've been extremely generous with us. That's a social and green impact startup or startup accelerator that's funded by 3M, and we're part of Capital Factory. And we just got accepted into this. We're going to be competing we're finalists now for this Urban Futures Prize that NYU is putting on. That's a kind of breaking news that came out yesterday that they broke that we're one of the 5 finalists for our division.
Oh my gosh.
And Flatley as well.
And Flatley Innovation Center up in New Hampshire, which was John Flatley up there, is a well-known biotech and commercial real estate mogul, and he has a love for startups. So we won first prize with them also. I guess we are being pretty disruptive after all.
Well, and I think that speaks to your question, Heather, around what is our success through Mass Challenge and the programs that John just mentioned done for us, and it's really that national exposure, right? We've gone from trying to address the problem locally to really gaining some notoriety in other places through that same accelerator incubator type of program. So it's given us a national footprint. It's really exciting. Right.
So how was it when the story broke in Austin about the mussel issue here? That must have been just a huge pivot for y'all, because I think a lot of people have been explaining to them that this is going on until it actually affects their daily life. It's probably, difficult to grasp.
Yeah.
So has that been a big change? Has that created a major change for you guys as far as in this market or just in general?
Yeah, so every time they're in the news in Austin, it kind of hits us pretty heavy. And then so we're raising funds through CTAN currently. And when we did our big showcase event, the next morning, everybody woke up to disgusting smelling showers, which was not bad timing for us, but still a terrible thing for the city.
Mother Nature, if you could just do me one big favor. What's happened today?
So that whole day, I was just getting inundated with phone calls and emails up until like 1 a.m. of what do we do? Is it safe? This, that, and the other. All the questions you would think to ask. And then Monday morning was the same thing, and then we ended up or Friday morning was the same thing, and then we ended up doing a whole bunch of press around it because obviously people wanted to talk about the problem.
Right.
So yeah.
Wow. So I guess then, maybe one of the couple of questions I have just completely more of on the inspiration side is what it's like for you guys with this. I know you've started companies before. You have a history in the water business, and maybe you can talk more about your background too. But, is this company being as disruptive as it is, how different is it from things you've done in the past? What are some of the challenges you're facing, as people that are trying to do something so innovative that it's almost hard to grasp because It's such a new technology?
It's a great question, and it's certainly something that we're being challenged by because the water industry as a whole is relatively conservative. They're tasked with providing safe, reliable drinking water at all times, and any kind of disruption or change in how that's done is taken with great deals of caution. So it is something where we're really having to visit with them and try to identify specifically what their problem or their solution might be to try to see how we fit in. So it's been, for me, very interesting. I've always thought of myself as an innovator and pushing new ideas. So that's what's really exciting about being able to do this. But facing the industry, it's been interesting because they are so conservative in terms of implementing new technology. Right. So it takes a little bit of time for even the city of Austin. They're being very cautious in terms of how they're approaching the problem. And so something new takes some time to integrate into the process. So that's been something that I certainly enjoy doing that. I'm certainly bringing new ideas to the table. It's something I've always appreciated doing. But that's been probably the big realization for me is that we don't, from the water industry perspective, don't innovate as quickly as we probably would like to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then that said, we also have some amazing partners at federal and state agencies who we've gotten to know. And that's kind of our strategy early on was we realized that we had to become thought leaders in this industry for anybody to believe that what I'm coming with and saying, hey, this cancer tech thing, we can use it here. They kind of look at you like, oh, is he a wizard? No, it's science. But then I have to kind of go through and explain the science and talk about it, show them what it can do pilot studies, that kind of thing. But through that process, we've made amazing friends and partnerships with Texas Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Reclamation are doing wonderful work with us. USGS has been fabulous. There's a whole group called the Western Regional Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species. Mm-hmm. Shout out to them because Elizabeth Brown that runs it, and she's also the invasive species coordinator for Colorado, and Leah Elwell, just fabulous work. And we're working on them currently to kind of write regulations around molecular sampling in our industry.
Wow.
Well, and that's a really good point because I think that's really what we've established as a reputation with the regulators and people who do bring that kind of technology to the market, so that in 4 years, the federal guidelines are going to say you should be using this technology. Right. And that's what we're working on, sort of the end around to where the municipalities are going to go back to the guidebook and say, what do we do? And it's going to say, use this kind of technology.
Well, and that's not just a good business practice. They need to.
That's absolutely right.
It's the current solutions. I mean, these people work in ridiculously long hours and incredibly hard to try and protect our water supplies. It's just that the current technology, the current state of art is not up to the task. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's a necessity to kind of move the ball a little bit forward on the technology side to get this going. We're also working on a product with Bureau of Reclamation that's an actual smart drug approach to eradicate zebra mussels and leave everything else alone. That's a longer haul, but it's we have to keep moving the technology forward if we're gonna have a sustainable ecosystem and water supply going forward.
And when you talk about invasive species, what other types of species are there to be concerned about?
Lots. Asian carp is certainly one that comes to mind almost immediately. It's a national problem. Traditionally, for invasive species, we've get plants, hydrilla and giant salmonella and salvinia, excuse me.
Yep, and water milfoil up north is a big one.
Yeah.
Starry stonewort, we hear about that a lot. There are invasive algae that are attacking coral in Hawaii. There's mud snails, Asian clams. I mean, there's a list.
It's a long list.
Nutria are obviously a pain. Those are larger mammals, but still.
Okay, so now you're working on this concept of the DNA based approach to eradicating something or preventing something.
That's right.
What other things could you apply this science to besides what you're doing right now?
So the endangered one is kind of the one that pops up the easiest, is this idea of, there's these endangered species and, it's difficult to detect a lot of them. Obviously here in Austin, we have these blind salamanders and they live kind of in caves and groundwater supplies, and that's why they're blind, right? So how do you find those guys? And the answer is divers with a lot of time, and there's not a great way to really track that population because they're in places where we can't go. So looking at DNA and RNA and things like that can get you a better understanding of not just where the population is, but also how healthy is it? What's it doing? And then we can find better ways to protect those endangered species.
Yeah.
And there's a lot from business perspective, there's a lot of opportunity there as well, but there are tons of endangered species around the country, and every riverway, every freshwater resource essentially is a protected environment for endangered species. So it's a massive area. Like I was saying, the end goal is to kind of look at, may have heard of the microbiome for like gut microbiota and human health.
Yeah.
We consider this the macrobiome, right? And it's for environmental health. So the macrobiome of the aquatic environments or terrestrial environments are incredibly important to the health of the planet. And it's the same idea as your gut microbiota. So we want to be able to sample and figure out everything that's living in there, natives, invasives, everything, endangers, and how are they doing? How are those populations interacting? And what do we need to do as stewards of our environment to push one lever one way or the other lever the other way to create sustainability?
So there's this big movement going on with DNA and prevention right now for health, health of humans, health of animals, things like that. So this is more health of the environment.
Absolutely.
It's very cool. Is there a term that describes this movement? Like
awareness?
DNA tech or wow.
We usually get lumped into, we're ostensibly a biotech company, but we usually get lumped into envirotech, clean tech, something along those lines. We like to say we're a SaaS company, a science as a service company, which always gets a laugh from certain types in the investor world.
That's right.
As far as the movement goes, a lot of this is it's molecular sampling is what it is. Or aside from that, I don't know if I.
Well, I think there's a general.
We should coin one.
We should.
I don't have one.
I agree. No, I think
right
we should
now.
coin one. That's right. This is it.
We're live.
But I think there is something around this general environmental awareness, right? There is over the last decade, there's been much more focus on what kind of an impact are we having on the environment, and on trying to understand baseline data. Where are we in certain stages of our awareness around pieces of the environment, particularly water and water quality? We're looking at emerging contaminants, and we're starting to understand more and more about how the water quality is actually being impacted. So I think there's a general trend that we're sort of participating in, where there's a greater focus on trying to understand our environment, and we've got a technology to easily understand that, and get a broader array of what's happening. And coming back to your question around, in John's answer around endangered species, native mussels are a major issue in our Texas rivers currently, and it's something that is going to significantly impact the supply side of things, how much water is coming down the river in order to protect those habitats. And we don't understand much about those mussels yet. They're going to get listed this fall as endangered, and we don't really know what to do. Again, our technology can help characterize those rivers and let you know where and what kind of condition those mussels are in. So we see a lot of application in that general awareness around what is the quality of our environment, right? So that's environmental quality assessment. Maybe that's the term we're trying to work on, but something like that.
Right. Well, I think it's awesome that you're here in Austin and launching this company.
We're super
here
excited.
in Texas, and I know it's going to blow up, and it's just a matter of time. And just great to get this interview while we can, because you're going to you're going global.
We'll always make time for you, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity.
Where can people learn more about you guys?
So our website is EQO.life. You can go there, and then we always are happy to take. We try to be as open and accessible as possible to the community. So send us an email through that. We have a contact section on there, but again, the website's EQO.life. And I think that's the best place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to come talk to you.
You can check out some of our many press appearances.
That's right. Become fans of social media.
Yeah.
This is the best one so far.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here, especially during South by.
Indeed.
We're just thrilled that the timing's perfect.
It is
May
perfect,
you
yeah.
disrupt the South
And
by.
the beautiful view, thank you.
And come out of Austin with swinging. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to Richard's Rainwater and to Brain
Very
Juice.
good.
And to
because,
Brain Juice,
again,
that's right.
One of these.
I'm so excited about this. And the Long Center for having us here today. We love your space. We want to come back. And to all of you for listening to Up and Comers.
Thank you.